term, you say it, but we don't live it. To say it, but to live it is two different things. Now, let me say this now. I mentioned Adam. From Adam, we get our human identity. But in the Quran, it says, you have heard this term, people of the book. Now, that's a translation, but that's not what the Quran is actually saying. Prophet Muhammad, he referred to each of the major prophets. Adam was called father. The other prophets were called brother until they got to Abraham. Abraham was called father. So all of those are family names. The Quran, the term that's translated to people of the book, the phrase is Ahl Kitab. Now, I've been speaking to Muslim scholars. Some have missed this because of some of the hurt that Muslim world is going through. They're not seeing things clearly. And this is part of why some Muslims are not seeing this too. If I say to them, and if you speak the language, if I say ku anfusikum wa ahlikum nar, you hear ahil in there? I said ahil kitab. Ahil means family. Now the same scholars that I say that first expression, they would immediately translate that to save yourself and your family from the fire. But when I say ahil kitab, they'll say people. Now, so there's a difference between another and other. Family and people. People are way. Family brings you close. You see. So this is one of the things that Imam Muhammad, because he's studying the pure source, undistracted by the disturbed source of the Middle East and the other world and such. And so if I say that without explaining that, they would automatically disagree with me. And they would say that Imam Muhammad didn't teach you all the Quran in the life of the Prophet. You see, because they have gotten away from studying the pure source, and most of the Islamic work, quote unquote, we call it, which gives a small picture, is studying scholarly stuff. That scholars are giving them their commentary, their translations, and they're coming from an eye of hurt. You see, they got a translation in the Quran that they gave, the Middle East gave us, that says, do not take Christians and Jews as your friends. That's the translation that they gave us. You see? But Imam Muhammad said that's in the language of the Quran, so he's not looking at what the Quran is actually saying. They're dealing with an experience. Christians and others hurt them. Crusades, colonization, other stuff that hurt. So it's a hurt eye. That's not what God is saying. You see? So God helps us to rise above that and see ourselves and puts us on the same field where we can be able to embrace each other. That's why it was so easy for Imam Muhammad to engage with other people of faith. And the other beautiful thing is this. Most of the Muslims don't have relatives who are not of their faith. If you go to some place like Saudi, you go to some place like these other places, it's difficult. So they come to America, and they're in this environment that is not like their environment. But for us, my mother, my sister, my uncle, my cousin, my brother, you see? So when I look at the Quran, I can see that more clearly. I can see what they miss because they're not even in the situation. So God created a situation here to help us, to help them. But we're engaged with what I'm very encouraged by the local relationships that we have, the national relationships that we have, interfaith relationships, and international. That it is changing. And in fact, I've talked to a lot of theology schools, and they come to visit and we talk at Nations Mosque. We're beginning to help to see the family piece, and we'll come together. Because I was speaking with someone earlier, everything they said about the principles of the Bible, every single one of those principles are in the Quran, in the life of the Muslim, and the Jew, etc. There's only, let me give you this story real quick. When Islam was growing, Prophet Muhammad, he had some protection because his uncle was like a leader, one of the tribal leaders. So he had protection. Now, again, it was difficult. If you know the history of Islam, he began to bring, they were pagans. They worshiped other things other than the one God. And so when he began to bring them the message of the one God, obviously that caused some resistance, mainly because Mecca was, even though it was paganism and they were crazy, they brought a lot of commerce there because everybody, all the other tribes would come to Mecca. It was always a place of pilgrimage. and they had 360 plus gods in what's called the Kaaba. And they will all come and travel, and they pray to their gods, wish them good fortune, and everything like that, and they bring money to a lot of business, a lot of trade, tourism, everything. That was the money thing. So when he's not talking about one God, get rid of all these other gods, I mean, you done hurt the income, you know? So that was a big deal. So they begin to, again, those who begin to embrace that, they begin to, if you don't let it go, there are going to be consequences. And of course, the companions, the prophet, they want to embrace the one God, so they begin to kill them and torture them. So the prophet said, you don't have to leave. Those ones, he said, I'm good because I got protection, but you all don't have protection, you all going to have to leave. And they said, where should we go? He said, go to Abyssinia, because Abyssinia has been reduced now to what's called Ethiopia. Must be the land. It was a Christian kingdom that controlled that land. And the prophet had enough of the scripture to know, like I just told you, that we're family. He didn't know the king, but he knew that we were family, and he trusted that he would protect them. So the prophet sent his followers to this land, Ethiopia. We're going to say Ethiopia. And the enemy, the pagan enemy who was torturing them, did know the king. They had a good relationship in terms of doing business. So when he heard that the prophet Muhammad had sent his followers to that land, under that king, he knew that he can go there because of his relationship. He would get them, bring them back, and torture them and let them know they had no place to run to get away from them. That's what his plan. So he went behind them, and he went to the king and told the king, you know, one of the people who were rebel in Mecca sent some people here who are also rebels, and we come to get them and take them back so they don't cause no disturbances. And so the king said, yeah, you know, this is a place of peace. We can't have no rebels here. Yeah, get them away from us. And so when they went to get them, the king sent his folks to find them and bring them so they can turn them over to the pagan leader. And the followers saw this. And so they began to say to the king, what's going on? Our prophet said that you would protect us. And the king said, I don't even know him, you know. And they begin to speak about, he said you was this, you was that, different things, you know. And what you believe in, and he mentioned Jesus. And so the pagans say, see, king, he mentioned Jesus, and they called Jesus a prophet. And the king said, what do you all know? You all, I mean, because, again, this is a known world, right? They knew that Arabia, it was paganism. They didn't expect anything to come from them. And they didn't have scripture as a people. So he said, I mean, come on, you all don't know that. So the father began to give him the story of Mary. That's really in the Quran. That he was actually reciting the Quran to him, where he cast lots and I went to the whole thing. And the story when the angel came to her and she said, how can I have it? That you're going to have a son. And she said, how can I have a son with no man touch? This whole thing is in the Quran, this whole chapter. And so the king heard this. And after the king heard it, he grabbed his staff. He already had his staff, but he took his staff tight, and he walked over to this companion. And then he drew a line in the sand. And this is what he said. He said, the difference between you and me, or you and I, is no different than this line right here. And then he turned to the person that he knew. And he said, not for a mountain's weight of gold. And that's a lot of gold. Will I turn them over to you? And he turned back to them, and he said, you all are free to stay in my kingdom under my protection for as long as you would like. Now,